The rain fell so heavily that it felt as if the sky itself had broken apart.
We're almost
Mrs.
there.
Choi could barely
Don't
see where
stop
she was
running.
running. Her soaked clothes clung to her trembling body as she
Hold on
struggled
tight,
through the
girls,
muddy path,
girls. We're
clutching
almost
one
there.
little girl tightly against
Don't
her
stop
chest
running.
while dragging another by the hand. Faster. Faster, she cried. The little girl stumbled. Ani Choi, I'm tired. We can't stop, sweetheart. We can't stop. A flash of lightning illuminated the darkness. And that was when Mrs. Choi saw them. 3 masked men. They were still chasing them. Her heart nearly stopped. Oh God. The men were gaining ground. One of them pointed toward her. There they are. The twins screamed. Mrs. Choi tightened her grip around the child in her arms and forced her exhausted legs to move faster. The rain was merciless. Every step felt heavier than the last. Mud splashed everywhere. Branches scratched her face. Her lungs burned. But she could not stop. Not tonight. Not after what had happened. Not after what she had seen. Another lightning strike flashed across the sky. The little girl holding her hand burst into tears. Auntie Choi. Yes. Where is Mommy? Mrs. Choi's throat tightened. Tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. She couldn't answer. The child looked up at her again. Why are those men chasing us? Mrs. Choi swallowed hard. We're going somewhere safe. Where is Mommy? The question pierced her heart like a knife. The little girl asked again. Where is Mommy? Mrs. Choi looked away. She could still hear the gunshot. She could still see the blood. She could still hear Nneka's voice. And suddenly, fear gripped her chest. The masked men were getting closer. Very close. Too close. One of them shouted. Stop running. Mrs. Choi looked ahead desperately. Then she saw lights. A road. A vehicle. Hope. She waved frantically. Help. The vehicle continued moving. Help. The twins began crying louder. The headlights grew brighter. The vehicle slowed. Mrs. Choi nearly collapsed with relief. But before she could reach the road, a hand grabbed her shoulder. She screamed. The little girl screamed. Everything froze. And then, 5 years earlier. If this is your first time on the channel, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and share this story with someone who loves powerful emotional dramas. What happened that rainy night would change several lives forever. 5 years earlier, nobody could have imagined that Kang Min-Jae's life would end up where it did. People across Seoul knew his name. Some admired him. Many feared him. Others simply stayed out of his way. He was one of the most powerful men in the city. But power had not always belonged to him. There was a time when Kang Min-Jae was just a hungry boy living in a tiny room with his widowed mother. A time when he had only one pair of shoes. A time when he often went to bed hungry. Back then, nobody noticed him. Nobody respected him. Nobody cared. Those painful memories stayed with him for years. And perhaps that was why he became obsessed with never being poor again. By the age of 38, he had built an empire. Luxury cars, nightclubs, businesses, properties, political connections, influential friends. Money flowed through his hands like water. His mansion alone was larger than the apartment complex where he had grown up. On one particular evening, Min-Jae sat inside an exclusive restaurant reserved for politicians, celebrities, and wealthy businessmen. Expensive wine covered the table. Laughter filled the room. Everyone wanted his attention. A politician raised his glass. To Kang Min-Jae. Everyone cheered. To Min-Jae. Min-Jae smiled proudly. He loved moments like this. The attention, the admiration, the power. A beautiful woman sitting beside him leaned closer. You're becoming more famous every day. Min-Jae smirked. Famous isn't enough. What do you mean? He leaned back comfortably. I want more. The woman laughed. More money. Min-Jae shook his head. Power. The politician sitting nearby overheard him. Then politics is your next step. The entire table nodded. Min-Jae's eyes lit up. The seed had just been planted. And it would eventually destroy everything. The following weekend, Min-Jae attended a luxury charity gala. Hundreds of wealthy guests filled the ballroom. Reporters surrounded him. Cameras flashed everywhere. As he walked through the crowd, people greeted him with smiles. Kang Min-Jae. Chairman Kang. Over here. He enjoyed every second. Then his eyes landed on someone standing quietly near the back of the room. A woman. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't chasing politicians. She wasn't trying to attract attention. She was simply talking with an elderly couple. Min-Jae smiled immediately.
Nneka.
The woman turned. Her face brightened. Min-Jae. Unlike everyone else in the room, she never called him Chairman Kang. Never. To her, he was still the same boy she had known since childhood. Nneka Okafor. The one person who remembered who he had been before the money. She walked over. You look tired. Min-Jae laughed. That's the first thing you say to me? I'm serious. I'm fine. No, you're not. He shook his head. Still acting like my personal therapist? She smiled. Somebody has to. Min-Jae couldn't help laughing. Talking to Nneka always felt different. Peaceful. Real. She never cared about his money. Never cared about his influence. Never cared about his status. And that was exactly why he trusted her. How's work? He asked. Busy. Still winning every case? She laughed. Not every case. Most of them. Maybe. Nneka had become one of the most respected lawyers in Seoul. She had worked hard for everything she achieved. And unlike many people around Min-Jae, she remained humble. They spent several minutes talking. For the first time that evening, Min-Jae felt relaxed. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. A powerful political figure was calling. His expression changed instantly. Nneka noticed. What is it? Min-Jae smiled. Opportunity. What kind of opportunity?
He stood.
The kind that changes lives. Nneka looked at him carefully. Something about his excitement worried her. She couldn't explain why. But deep inside, she felt a strange sense of unease. As if something dangerous had just begun. And she was right. Because the decision Kang Min-Jae was about to make would eventually cost him his fortune. His peace. And the woman who loved him most. Kang Min-Jae answered the call with a confident smile. Assemblyman Lee. The politician's voice came through immediately. I've been looking for you. Min-Jae chuckled. That sounds expensive. It might be. The politician laughed. Meet me tomorrow. After the call ended, Min-Jae looked energized. Nneka studied him carefully. What was that about? Politics. Nneka's smile disappeared. Politics. Why do you look worried? Because you're already successful. He laughed. Successful isn't enough. Nneka folded her arms. Min-Jae, there are some roads that look attractive until you start walking on them. He smiled. And there are some roads that lead to greatness. Nneka sighed. She knew that look. Whenever Min-Jae became obsessed with something, convincing him otherwise was almost impossible. Just be careful. I always am. Unfortunately, those would become some of the most ironic words he would ever speak. Over the next several months, Min-Jae plunged into politics with the same intensity that had made him wealthy. His offices became campaign headquarters. His meetings multiplied. His spending increased. His ambitions grew larger every day. The more influential politicians he met, the more convinced he became that political power was the next level. Money could buy influence, but political power could control influence. And Min-Jae wanted control. One evening, he sat in a luxurious conference room surrounded by advisors. Charts covered the walls. Campaign projections filled the screens. One of his advisors smiled. Your popularity is growing. Another nodded. You have a real chance. Min-Jae grinned. That's what I like to hear. Then a third advisor spoke. We'll need more funding. Min-Jae frowned. How much? The room fell silent. When they finally revealed the figure, even Min-Jae blinked. That much. The advisor nodded. If you want to win. Min-Jae leaned back. He had spent fortunes before. This wasn't the first time. And it certainly wouldn't be the last. Approve it. The advisors exchanged satisfied glances. Money began flowing out faster than ever before. Campaign events, political favors, advertisements, partnerships, donations, more investments, more promises, more risk. Min-Jae barely noticed. He was too focused on the prize. Meanwhile, Nneka watched from a distance. The more involved he became, the less she recognized him. One evening she visited him at his office. The room was empty except for him. Stacks of documents covered his desk. He looked exhausted. Nneka placed a food container in front of him. "You haven't eaten." Min-Jae smiled. "You always know. Because you're predictable." He opened the container. The smell made him realize how hungry he was. As he ate, Nneka watched him quietly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When was the last time you slept properly?" Min-Jae laughed. "Sleep is overrated." "I'm serious." "So am I." Nneka shook her head. "You're pushing yourself too hard." "I'm building something important." "You already built something important."
No.
Min-Jae pointed toward the city skyline outside the window. "Everything out there can disappear." Nneka looked confused. "What are you talking about?" "The businesses. The money. The properties. They can all disappear." Nneka stared at him. "So you're afraid?" The question caught him off guard. He looked away. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. "Every day." Nneka softened. This wasn't the arrogant businessman speaking. This was the poor boy he used to be. The boy who feared losing everything. The boy who never forgot hunger. "I understand," she said softly. "No, you don't. Try me." Min-Jae sighed. "When you've been poor once."
His voice weakened.
"You spend the rest of your life trying not to become poor again." Nneka reached across the table. "You don't need more power to prove your worth." He smiled sadly. "Maybe." But deep down, he didn't believe her. Months later, disaster arrived. At first it seemed small. A major investment collapsed. Millions vanished. Min-Jae wasn't happy, but he remained calm. Then another deal failed. Then another. Then another. Within months, the losses became staggering. His advisors assured him everything would recover. It didn't. The election campaign consumed more money. His businesses began struggling. Banks started calling. Investors became nervous. For the first time in years, Kang Min-Jae felt genuine fear. One afternoon, he stormed into a meeting room. "Explain this." He slammed a financial report onto the table. The room fell silent. Nobody wanted to speak. "Somebody explain it." Finally, one executive cleared his throat. "We've suffered significant losses." "Significant." Min-Jae laughed bitterly. "This is a catastrophe." Nobody argued, because he was right. The following months became a nightmare. Properties were sold. Luxury vehicles disappeared. Projects were canceled. Expenses were reduced. Still, the losses continued. Then election day arrived. Min-Jae stood surrounded by supporters as the results were announced. The room grew quieter with every update. The numbers looked worse.
And worse.
And worse. Finally, the result became official. He had lost. The room went silent. Min-Jae stared at the screen, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to breathe. After everything he had spent, after everything he had sacrificed, he had lost. One by one, people began leaving. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody wanted to stay. Within 30 minutes, the room was almost empty. Min-Jae stood alone. The same people who had praised him for months suddenly vanished. His phone stopped ringing. His invitations disappeared. His influence evaporated. And then came the worst part, the loneliness. One evening, he called a former political ally. No answer. He called another. No answer. Another. No answer. Another.
Blocked.
Min-Jae stared at the phone. Disbelief slowly turning into reality. The people he had helped. The people he had funded, the people who once called him brother, had abandoned him. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. His mansion was sold. His staff left. His luxury lifestyle disappeared. The women who once surrounded him vanished completely. Everything changed. One rainy afternoon, he sat alone inside a small apartment. The silence felt unbearable. A knock interrupted his thoughts. He opened the door. Nneka stood there carrying groceries. Min-Jae smiled weakly. "You know, normal people call first." Nneka walked inside. Normal people don't disappear for 2 weeks. I've been busy. She looked around the nearly empty apartment. Doing what? Min-Jae laughed. Feeling sorry for myself. For the first time in months, Nneka saw honesty in his eyes. Not arrogance. Not pride. Not power. Just pain. She quietly unpacked the groceries. Then she started cooking. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, Min-Jae broke the silence. You know what's funny? What? I used to think everyone loved me. Nneka continued stirring the food. People loved what you could do for them. The truth hurt, but it was true. Min-Jae lowered his head. I lost everything. Nneka turned toward him.
No.
He looked up. You haven't. Min-Jae laughed bitterly. Really? Really? What do I still have? Nneka looked directly into his eyes. You still have the chance to become a better man. For the first time in a very long time, Kang Min-Jae felt tears gathering in his eyes. Because everyone else had abandoned him. Everyone except Nneka. And, without realizing it, the woman sitting across from him was slowly becoming the most important person in his life. For the first time in many years, Kang Min-Jae found himself looking forward to something that had nothing to do with money, or power, or influence. He looked forward to seeing Nneka. The realization surprised him. Every few days she visited. Sometimes with food. Sometimes with groceries. Sometimes with nothing at all except her presence. And somehow that was enough. One evening, they sat together on the balcony of his modest apartment. The city lights stretched endlessly before them. The same city that had once worshipped him. The same city that had forgotten him. Nneka handed him a cup of coffee. You look better. Min-Jae smiled. That's because you keep feeding me. You are becoming too skinny. He laughed. I never thought I'd hear someone accuse me of being skinny. Nneka laughed too. For a moment, everything felt normal, peaceful. Then Min-Jae looked at her. Really looked at her. The years had been kind to Nneka. She was beautiful, but it wasn't her beauty that affected him. It was her heart. She had seen him at his highest. She had seen him at his lowest.
And she never changed.
The thought lingered in his mind long after she left that night. Days later, Min-Jae was cleaning old boxes when he discovered a faded photograph. Two children stood smiling beside each other. A young Korean boy, a young Nigerian girl, both missing front teeth, both covered in mud, both laughing. Min-Jae stared at the picture, then smiled.
Nneka.
His thoughts drifted back. Back to childhood. Back to simpler days. Days before wealth. Days before politics. Days before pride. Back then, Nneka's father and his mother had lived in the same neighborhood. The two children had grown up together. Shared meals. Shared secrets. Shared dreams. When other children mocked Nneka for being different, Min-Jae defended her. When Min-Jae was bullied for being poor, Nneka defended him. They had always protected each other. Somewhere along the way, life had pulled them in different directions. Yet somehow they had found their way back. The more Min-Jae thought about it, the more he realized something. The happiest moments of his life always seemed to include her. Several weeks later, Nneka invited him to dinner. When he arrived, she looked nervous. Very nervous. Immediately, he sensed something was wrong. What happened? Nneka forced a smile. Nothing happened. You only make that face when something happened. She laughed softly. I forgot how well you know me. Min-Jae sat down. What is it? Nneka hesitated, then finally spoke. Someone proposed to me. The words hit him harder than he expected. For a second, he thought he had heard her incorrectly. Proposed. Nneka nodded. Min-Jae suddenly felt uncomfortable. His chest tightened. The room seemed smaller. Oh. Nneka studied his face carefully. That's all you have to say? What else am I supposed to say? I don't know. Min-Jae looked away, trying to hide the emotions flooding through him. But it was too late. For the first time, he understood something clearly. He didn't want another man marrying Nneka. The realization terrified him, because it meant only one thing. He was in love with her.
Deeply.
Completely. Hopelessly. That night, he barely slept. His mind replayed the conversation endlessly. The next day was even worse. The day after that was unbearable. A week later, Nneka called. My parents want you to come over. Min-Jae frowned. Why? The suitor's family is visiting. His heart sank. What? My parents want old family friends present. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. Yet somehow he agreed. The following evening became one of the most painful experiences of his life.
The suitor arrived.
He was handsome, successful, wealthy, confident. Everything Min-Jae used to be. The man's family brought gifts. Everyone seemed impressed. Everyone seemed happy. Except Min-Jae. Throughout the evening, he remained unusually quiet. Watching, listening, suffering. At one point, the suitor smiled at Nneka. You deserve someone who will take care of you. Nneka smiled politely.
Min-Jae felt sick.
The evening dragged on endlessly. By the time it ended, he could barely breathe. Outside the house, Nneka caught up with him. Min-Jae. He stopped walking. Are you okay?
No.
The honesty surprised even him. Nneka frowned. What do you mean? For several seconds, neither spoke. Then suddenly years of emotions erupted.
No.
His voice cracked. No, I'm not okay. Nneka stared at him, confused, concerned. Min-Jae. I don't want you to marry him. Silence. The words hung between them. Nneka blinked. What? I don't want you to marry him. Her heart started racing. Neither of them moved. Rain began falling lightly around them. Yet neither noticed. Min-Jae looked directly into her eyes. For once, there was no pride, no arrogance, no mask, only truth. I love you. Nneka's breath caught. The world seemed to stop. I should have said it years ago. His voice trembled. But I was stupid. He laughed bitterly. I spent years chasing money. I spent years chasing power. And all this time, his eyes filled with tears. The person I needed was standing right in front of me. Nneka felt her own emotions rising. Min-Jae. I love you. He stepped closer. If you marry him, I'll understand. His voice broke. But I needed you to know. The tears finally escaped. I love you. For the first time in years, Kang Min-Jae cried. Not because he had lost money. Not because he had lost power. But because he was afraid of losing her. Nneka had never seen him like this before. Never. The mighty Kang Min-Jae. The feared businessman. The man who once commanded entire rooms. Standing before her with tears running down his face. Completely vulnerable. Completely exposed. And somehow, she loved him for it. Days passed. Nneka thought carefully. The wealthy suitor offered security, comfort,
Stability.
a future free from uncertainty. Yet every time she imagined that future, something felt missing. Then she imagined Min-Jae, his flaws, his mistakes, his regrets,
His growth.
his heart. And slowly the answer became clear. A week later, she arrived at his apartment. Min-Jae opened the door, immediately sensing something important. Nneka smiled softly. I have news. His heart pounded. What news? She looked directly into his eyes. I turned him down. Min-Jae froze. What? I said no. His voice disappeared. Nneka smiled. Then tears filled her eyes. I choose you. For several seconds, neither moved. Neither spoke. Then Min-Jae pulled her into his arms. And for the first time in years, he felt truly rich again. Several months later, wedding preparations began. Nneka wanted something simple, something modest, something sensible. But Min-Jae secretly had another plan. A dangerous plan. One that would eventually destroy everything. One evening, he sat across from a man known throughout the criminal underworld. Chairman Park, the leader of a ruthless syndicate. The older man pushed a contract across the table. You understand the consequences? Min-Jae nodded. I do. Chairman Park smiled coldly.
No.
His eyes darkened. You don't. The room suddenly felt colder. If you fail to repay me, the old man leaned forward. I will take back every cent. A chill ran through Min-Jae's body. Yet he signed anyway. Because he wanted Nneka to have the wedding she deserved. Because pride still lived inside him. And because he had no idea that the signature he had just written was the beginning of a tragedy that would cost him far more than money. The wedding was everything Nneka had asked him not to do. And yet it was everything he insisted on doing. As the grand ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers and hundreds of guests filled the hall, Nneka stood quietly beside him. She looked beautiful, not because of the expensive dress, not because of the diamonds, not because of the decorations that had cost a fortune. She looked beautiful because she was genuinely happy. But deep inside, she was worried. As another group of guests approached to congratulate them, she leaned closer to Min-Jae. "Can I ask you something?" Min-Jae smiled. "Today of all days?" "I'm serious." He immediately recognized that tone. "What is it?" Nneka lowered her voice. "Where did all this money come from?" His smile stiffened. "What do you mean?" "Min-Jae." She looked around the massive hall. "The flowers alone must have cost a fortune." He laughed. "I told you already. You said you had money saved." "I do." Nneka wasn't convinced. "Then why didn't you use that money to start a business again?" The question made his stomach tighten. For a moment, he couldn't answer. Fortunately, another guest approached and interrupted them. Min-Jae smiled with relief. "We'll talk later." Nneka watched him walk away. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. But it was their wedding day. She chose not to push. For now. The celebration lasted late into the night. Everyone talked about it for weeks afterward. People who had once abandoned Min-Jae suddenly reappeared. Former associates. Former political allies. Former friends. All smiling. All pretending nothing had happened. Nneka noticed it immediately. After the last guest left, she sat beside Min-Jae. "Interesting." "What?" "The same people who disappeared when you became poor have suddenly remembered your phone number." Min-Jae laughed. "You noticed?" "Of course." "Welcome to my world." Nneka shook her head. "Promise me something." "What?" "If you become rich again." She squeezed his hand. "Don't become that man again." Min-Jae looked at her, then nodded. "I promise." And for the first time in many years, he truly meant it. A year later, their lives changed forever. The twins arrived. 2 beautiful baby girls. The moment the nurse placed them in his arms, Kang Min-Jae cried. Nneka laughed weakly from the hospital bed. "You're crying." "I'm not." "You are." "It's dust." "We're in a hospital." Min-Jae laughed through tears. The babies moved gently in his arms. He stared at them in amazement. "They're beautiful." Nneka smiled. "They look like you."
"No."
He shook his head. "Thank God they don't." That made her laugh even harder. For a while, life felt perfect. The twins filled their home with joy. Their laughter echoed through every room. Even simple moments became precious. Bedtime stories, family dinners, weekend outings, lazy Sunday mornings. For the first time, Min-Jae felt content. Not powerful, not wealthy, content. And he realized there was a difference. As the twins grew older, caring for them became increasingly difficult. Nneka was still practicing law. Her workload remained demanding. Eventually, she hired a housekeeper. A woman named Mrs. Choi. Quiet, polite, hardworking. Nobody knew much about her. Not even Min-Jae. What they didn't know was that Mrs. Choi would eventually become one of the most important people in their lives. One afternoon, Nneka found Mrs. Choi crying quietly in the kitchen. Immediately, she became concerned. "Mrs. Choi." The older woman quickly wiped her tears. "I'm sorry. What happened?" "It's nothing." Nneka sat beside her. "It's obviously something." Mrs. Choi hesitated, then finally spoke. "My son." "What about him?" "He's sick." Her voice broke. "The hospital wants money I don't have." Nneka listened quietly. The woman continued speaking through tears. "I've borrowed from everyone. Nobody can help. I don't know what to do." Without saying a word, Nneka reached for her handbag. She pulled out a check. Mrs. Choi stared at it. Then her eyes widened. "No." Nneka nodded. "Take it." "I can't." Yes, you can. Mrs. Choi began crying harder. Nneka, your son needs treatment. The older woman completely broke down. That day changed everything. From that moment forward, Mrs. Choi became fiercely loyal. Not because she worked for Nneka, because she loved her. Because Nneka had helped when nobody else would. Months passed. The twins turned 5. Life remained beautiful, at least on the surface. Because beneath the surface, the debt was growing. And Chairman Park had not forgotten. One evening, Min-Jae's phone rang. The moment he saw the number, his blood ran cold. Chairman Park. He answered immediately. Chairman. The older man's voice was calm.
Too calm.
I've been waiting. Min-Jae swallowed. I know. Do you? The silence felt threatening. I paid the first installment. Yes. Chairman Park paused. And now? Min-Jae looked toward the living room where Nneka was helping the twins with homework. His chest tightened. I'm working on it. The older man laughed. Not kindly, not warmly, coldly. Dangerous men don't accept effort as payment. Min-Jae said nothing. Chairman Park continued. You have 30 days. The call ended. Min-Jae sat frozen. 30 days. That wasn't enough time. Not even close. Over the following weeks, he tried everything. Business proposals, investors, loans, partnerships. Nothing worked. Every door seemed closed. Then the warnings began. The first was a letter. No return address. Only 3 words. Pay your debt. The second was worse. Someone smashed the windows of his car. The third was terrifying. A photograph arrived. It showed Nneka walking with the twins. Min-Jae nearly stopped breathing. A message was written across the back. We know where they are. That night, he barely slept. Nneka noticed immediately. The dark circles beneath his eyes. The tension. The anxiety. The constant checking of his phone. One evening, she finally confronted him. Enough. Min-Jae looked up.
What?
Tell me what's going on. Nothing. Stop lying. He looked away. Nneka moved closer. Min-Jae. Her voice softened. We're married. I know. Then let me help you. For a moment, he almost told her everything. The loan, the threats, the danger, everything. But fear stopped him. If she knew the truth, she would be terrified. So he forced a smile. I'm handling it. Nneka stared at him, disappointed, heartbroken, and unconvinced. Because for the first time since they got married, she felt him pulling away. Neither of them realized it then. But the clock was already ticking. And somewhere across the city, Chairman Park had finally lost his patience. Chairman Park was not a man known for patience. For weeks, Kang Min-Jae had been trying desperately to buy more time. But time was the one thing he no longer had. The calls stopped coming. The warning letters stopped arriving. Even the threats disappeared. And somehow, that frightened Min-Jae more than anything. Because dangerous men became quiet only when they had already made a decision. One evening, Nneka noticed him staring out the window. The twins were asleep. Mrs. Choi was cleaning the kitchen. The house was unusually peaceful. Nneka walked over. You've been standing here for 20 minutes. Min-Jae forced a smile. Have I? Yes. She studied him carefully. His eyes looked tired, defeated, haunted. Nneka gently touched his arm. Talk to me. For a moment he almost did. He almost told her everything. The loan, the lies,
The debt.
the threats, the danger, everything. But shame stopped him. How could he tell her that the extravagant wedding he had insisted on giving her had been built on borrowed money? How could he tell her that his pride had placed their family in danger? He looked away. It's nothing. Nneka sighed. You know what hurts the most? Min-Jae looked at her. What? You don't trust me. His heart broke. Because she was right. Before he could respond, one of the twins suddenly appeared in the hallway rubbing her eyes.
Daddy.
Both parents smiled instantly. The little girl walked toward them sleepily. I had a bad dream. Min-Jae picked her up. What happened in the dream? The child wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. Bad people were chasing Mommy. The smile vanished from his face. Nneka noticed. The little girl yawned. But Daddy saved her. Min-Jae kissed her forehead. I'll always protect Mommy. The child smiled. Then he carried her back to bed. Those words would haunt him forever. 3 days later, Min-Jae received an invitation to meet potential investors in another city. It was an opportunity he desperately needed. If the deal worked, he could solve part of his financial crisis. Before leaving, he hugged Nneka. I'll be back tomorrow. Nneka smiled. Don't work too hard. He kissed her forehead, then looked at the twins. Be good for Mommy. We will. Mrs. Choi walked him to the gate. Safe journey, sir. Min-Jae nodded. Then he left. None of them knew it would be the last time he would see Nneka healthy. That night, heavy rain covered Seoul. Thunder rolled across the sky. Inside the house, Nneka had finally managed to get the twins to sleep. Mrs. Choi finished cleaning the kitchen. Everything seemed normal. Then the power went out. The entire house plunged into darkness. Mrs. Choi frowned. That's strange. Nneka looked up from her book. Probably the storm. Another thunderclap echoed outside. Then came a sound. A loud crash. Both women froze. Mrs. Choi looked toward the hallway. What was that? Nneka stood up. The lawyer in her immediately sensed danger. Stay with the girls. Nneka. Stay with them. Another crash. This time louder. Much louder. Someone was inside the house. Nneka's heart started racing. Slowly, she moved toward the staircase. The darkness felt suffocating. Then she saw a shadow. A man wearing a mask. Standing inside her home. For a split second, neither moved. Then the man lunged. Nneka screamed. The fight exploded instantly. She grabbed a lamp. Smashed it against him. The masked man stumbled backward. Another entered through the doorway. Then another. Nneka fought desperately. Not because she believed she could win. Because her children were upstairs. One of the men grabbed her arm. She kicked him. Another swung at her.
She dodged.
The struggle continued. Upstairs, Mrs. Choi heard everything. The screams. The crashes. The fighting. Fear gripped her entire body. Then she heard Nneka scream. Take the girls and run. The words shattered her paralysis. Immediately, she rushed into the twins' room. The frightened children were awake and crying. Auntie Choi. Come with me. What about Mommy? Mrs. Choi's eyes filled with tears. Come now. Downstairs, Nneka continued fighting. One masked man fell. Another crashed into a table. For several seconds, she held them back. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Too late. A gunshot exploded through the house. The pain was instant. Nneka gasped. Her legs gave way. Everything slowed. The masked men froze. Blood spread across the floor. Nneka collapsed. Upstairs, Mrs. Choi heard the shot. Her heart stopped. She knew exactly what it meant. Without wasting another second, she grabbed the twins. Then ran. She escaped through the back entrance, just as the men moved upstairs. Rain hammered against them. Thunder shook the night. The twins cried uncontrollably. Auntie Choi. Where's Mommy? Mrs. Choi couldn't answer. She simply ran. Back at the house, the attackers disappeared before police arrived. Neighbors eventually discovered Nneka. An ambulance rushed her to the hospital. By the time Min-Jae's phone rang, he was several hours away. The moment he heard the words, his entire world collapsed. Your wife has been shot. For several seconds, he couldn't breathe. What? The nurse repeated herself. Min-Jae nearly dropped the phone. The drive back felt endless. Every second became torture. Every traffic light felt like an enemy. Every delay felt unbearable. When he finally reached the hospital, he ran through the corridors. Nneka, a doctor stopped him. Sir. Where is my wife? The doctor's expression said everything. Min-Jae felt terror consume him. Please. The doctor sighed. She is alive. Relief flooded him. Then the doctor continued. But barely. Minutes later, Min-Jae entered the room. Nneka looked pale.
Weak.
Fragile. Machines surrounded her. For the first time in his life, Kang Min-Jae felt completely helpless.
He took her hand.
Nneka. Her eyes slowly opened. A faint smile appeared. You came. Tears immediately filled his eyes. I'm here. Nneka squeezed his hand weakly. The silence between them carried years of love, years of friendship, years of memories. Then she spoke. The girls. They're safe. Relief appeared on her face. Thank God. Min-Jae broke down. I'm sorry. Nneka looked at him,
Confused.
he couldn't stop crying. I'm sorry. The words poured out. The money. The wedding.
The debt.
The threats. Everything. For the first time, he told her the truth. Every lie. Every mistake. Every foolish decision. When he finished, tears covered his face. Nneka listened quietly. Then she smiled sadly. You idiot. A weak laugh escaped her. Min-Jae laughed through tears. I'm sorry. I know. You should hate me. Nneka slowly shook her head. I could never hate you. Those words shattered him. She was dying. And she still chose love. Nneka looked into his eyes. Promise me something. Anything. Take care of our daughters. I will. Raise them well. I promise. Teach them kindness. His voice cracked. I will. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Become the man I always knew you could be. Min-Jae squeezed her hand. I will. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nneka whispered, I love you. The monitor suddenly changed. The room erupted into movement. Doctors rushed forward. Nurses followed. Min-Jae was pushed back.
No.
The panic returned. No. The doctors worked desperately. Minutes felt like years. Then, finally, the monitor became silent. A long, continuous tone filled the room. The doctor lowered his head. And everything ended. Min-Jae collapsed. The scream that escaped him seemed to come from the deepest part of his soul. The woman who had stayed when everyone else left. The woman who chose him when he had nothing. The woman who loved him despite every mistake.
Was gone.
Days later, after the funeral, Min-Jae sat alone holding a photograph. Nneka's photograph. The twins slept nearby. Mrs. Choi watched quietly from the doorway. Neither spoke, because there were no words. Only grief. Only regret. Only love. The money he borrowed to impress the world had cost him the one person who never needed impressing. And for the rest of his life, Kang Min-Jae would carry that burden. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Tell us in the comments, do you think Nneka made the right decision choosing Min-Jae despite his past mistakes? And what would you have done differently if you were in his position? Because sometimes, the most expensive thing a person can lose is not money. It's the person who loved them when they had nothing.